Hi there, and welcome to the first of our videos, which is on London by William Blake, written in 1794. When you've finished this revision video, you should know three quotations from this poem, which these three images in front of you represent. So first of all, what is London? What happens in this poem? Well, basically, the speaker, the person telling the story, walks around the streets of London near the Thames at the end of the 18th century, and he sees how miserable everyone is at that time. Children, men, religious people, soldiers, everyone seems to be affected by this terrible experience and suffering. And around midnight, at the end of his walk, the speaker hears prostitutes and crying babies, and when he hears these sounds together, he wonders how there can possibly be any hope for the future at all when everyone is having such a terrible time. Now a quick reading of the poem. I wandered through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every ban, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most, through midnight streets, I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear, and blights with plague the marriage hearse. So some key words that we need to understand to talk about this poem are these five. So despair is a feeling of desperation and a lack of hope, which is very much what Blake is feeling at this time. Oppression is the idea of using power to control people and control how they think and what they do, and he sees the government oppressing people in this poem. Universal is an adjective to describe something that happens to everyone. It's universal if it happens to men, women and children, for example. Suffering is universal in this poem. Industrial London is the London of the late 18th century, London full of factories, very black with smoke, where a lot of people worked. And the ruling class are those who have power, and the lower class are the people at the bottom of the social ladder, for example, the prostitutes and chimney sweeps, the soldiers that Blake talks about. So in order to get confident and how to write about what happens in this poem, now would be a good time to stop this video and write one sentence using each of these words and saying, well, how does this relate to the poem London? So you can do that now. Okay, having done that, we're going to go through four key quotations for this poem, starting with this one. I wander through each chartered street. Why does Blake start the poem like this? We're always looking at that first line. Well, the verb wander, the poem starts off with some freedom. Wandering is walking wherever you want, and so this verb shows that the poet, the speaker, is free at the start. However, there is repetition. I wander through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow. Chartered means owned. It's the property of somebody. It's controlled. And this shows how everything is owned and controlled in London. Even the streets are chartered. The river is chartered. Blake doesn't think they should be. Last of all, this means there's a very contradictory start. He wants to be free, but he can only wander where he's allowed. This is the world we live in today, where some streets are private and you're not allowed down them. Secondly, we have in every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear. Of course, there's a lot of repetition here. Every and cry shows how suffering is universal in this poem. It affects everybody from men to infants. There is also a semantic field, a group of words of infants. So cry and infant shows how when people in power are very oppressive, they tell us all what to do, that makes us all into children. We're desperate, we're very weak and vulnerable, just like children are. So this moves the reader to pity that everyone is as weak and vulnerable as a child in this poem. The classic quotation in this poem is "mind-forged manacles." Manacles are like handcuffs, and mind-forged means they're actually all in your mind. So it is a symbol. The only limits are in people's minds. Blake thinks that even though the government's telling you what to do, no one can really force you if you don't let yourself be forced. The alliteration of M, mind-forged, and then manacles, emphasises how there aren't any real manacles. The manacles are in your mind, they're imaginary. Alternatively, you could say that manacles has a connotation of prison. Handcuffs are what you wear when you're on your way to prison. And so those who break the laws in London at this time are punished if they complain. They're actually put in real manacles. Two ways to see this image. And then, last of all, you have this line, "blights with plague the marriage hearse." A hearse is the kind of car that coffins are transported in funerals, and the plague, of course, is a disease. So we don't associate marriage and with disease and funerals. So plague has associations of disease and poor hygiene, both of which were happening in London at the time. There's plague everywhere. And also the marriage hearse. It's an oxymoron. That means it seems to do two different things, two opposite things. Marriage is the beginning of married life, and the hearse is at a funeral the end of married life. So when you combine those two, it makes the whole thing seem pointless. What's the point in having a future with somebody if you're just going to suffer like all these people in London and then die? So a very pessimistic end to the poem, showing that people in power are making everyone's lives a misery. This is very much a symbol of hopelessness. For revision cards or a mind map then, I would memorise, test yourself, learn these quotations. If you're aiming for grades 7 to 9, some higher grades, you might want to look at this image, the "runs in blood down palace walls." This is a very political image. Overtly means obviously. Blake is writing a political poem and he doesn't care who knows it. It recalls the French Revolution, most obviously the storming of the Bastille in 1789, which is when the people of France took over the power from the royal family. So, "runs in blood down palace walls" is an image we can call very anti-authoritarian. It's very aggressive on Blake's part. I would say that he smears this symbolic blood on the walls of the king's palace. That's an incredibly aggressive and dangerous thing to do. And what is it that's running in blood? He says it's a soldier's sigh. So he's putting the blame for all the soldiers who die in wartime and all the soldiers who suffer and sigh right on the king's head. So very courageous but very dangerous thing to do with Blake. He does not trust the people in power. I hope that's helpful, and enjoy the rest of this series of videos.